I don't remember exactly how I ended up here, in this small town on the coast of California. It was supposed to be a new start, a new city, a new job, new opportunities. After years of disappointments in love and attempts to find something real in the big city, I decided I needed a change of scenery. I closed all the old chapters, moved here, and got a job at a cafe. It seemed like the perfect place for a fresh beginning, away from the past that had been dragging me down. He appeared when I thought I had everything figured out. I was trying to settle into my life without thinking about romance and distractions, but his eyes were like a magnet. Jake. We met by chance, like everything else in my life, and somehow we started talking. His smile was genuine, the kind that made you feel like everything was going to be okay, like you could trust him. He was kind and open, someone who shared himself even when it wasn't easy. He was there, always supportive. To me, this was something new. I was used to hiding parts of myself, being cautious. But with him, everything felt different. Our first dates were simple. We rode bikes around the city, sat at cafes, and talked about the things that worried us. He was a great conversationalist, and his thoughts were clear, honest. Jake was a very open person, and I liked that. He was kind and sincere, like a child who didn't fear sharing his emotions. But even with all of this, I started feeling like something was missing. It seemed like everything in my relationship with Jake was going well, but deep down, I had this nagging feeling that I was losing something important. We had it all: trust, closeness, love. But was that enough for me to feel truly happy? Sometimes, sitting in his room and looking at his face, I wondered if I needed something more, something I couldn't put into words. At some point, I noticed that he talked more and more about his brother, Luke. Luke was completely different. He wasn't as open as Jake. Luke was always a bit distant, quiet, yet there was something magnetic about him. He didn't like talking about himself, but he was always around. His silence was so loud that it made me feel like he was hiding something I couldn't understand. Luke was older, and maybe that's what made him so mysterious. He knew what he was doing, but his gaze sometimes made me feel uncomfortable, as though he could see right through me, into the deepest parts of my soul. He often came to our place, especially when Jake stayed late at work. And every time we were left alone, there was this heavy, unspoken tension. He didn't ask questions, didn't intrude on my thoughts, but I could feel his presence. Luke was part of something bigger. The days after that night felt like I was walking in a fog, lost and unsure of everything. My thoughts were tangled, looping over the same memory again and again. I kept seeing Luke's face in the dim light, the way he looked at me, the way my body betrayed my mind. I told myself it was a mistake, a fleeting moment of weakness, but I knew that was a lie. A mistake is something you regret immediately, something you wish had never happened. But deep inside, I didn't regret it. And that terrified me. Every time I saw Jake, I felt a crushing weight on my chest. He would smile at me, wrap his arms around me like he always did, press his lips to my forehead in that soft, familiar way. But it didn't feel the same anymore. There was an invisible barrier between us, one he couldn't see but I could feel with every inch of my being. I tried to pretend, tried to act like nothing had changed. I told myself to just move on, to forget what had happened with Luke and be the girlfriend Jake deserved. But I couldn't. The guilt was relentless, creeping into every moment of my day. It wasn't just guilt over what I had done, it was guilt over the way I felt about it. The truth was, I wanted it to happen again. And then there was Luke. He didn't act like nothing had happened. He didn't avoid me, but he didn't go out of his way to see me either. When we were in the same room, he barely looked at me. And when he did, it was never for long, just a flicker of a glance before he turned away, like he was trying to convince himself it never happened. But I saw it in his eyes. That same turmoil, the same desire and regret tangled into one. We had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I kept waiting for something to happen, for him to say something, for me to confess to Jake, for some kind of punishment to come crashing down on me. But the days passed and nothing changed. It was unbearable. I thought avoiding Luke would make it easier, but it only made me think about him more. The space between us felt charged, like something was waiting to snap. I became hyper-aware of every little detail. The way he'd flex his jaw when he was thinking. The way his fingers tapped lightly against the table when he was restless. The way his presence alone made the air around me feel too heavy to breathe. And then it happened again. Jake was working late, again. I was home alone, or at least I thought I was. I was in the kitchen when I heard the door open. My heart jumped into my throat. For a split second, I thought it was Jake, that he had come home early, that he knew. But when I turned, it was Luke. We just stood there, staring at each other, frozen. I should have left the room. I should have walked past him, out the door, anywhere but there. But I didn't. He took a step closer and I felt it again. That same pull, that same magnetic force that had taken over that night. I didn't know if it was him moving toward me or me moving toward him, but suddenly the space between us was gone, and this time I didn't even try to stop it. It wasn't rushed like the first time. It was slow, deliberate. His hands brushed against my arms, my waist, his fingers pressing into my skin like he was trying to memorize the shape of me. I tilted my head back, and his lips found my neck, sending shivers down my spine. My body responded before my mind could even process what was happening. I wanted this. I had wanted this since the first time. There was no excuse now. The first time could have been called a mistake. This was a choice. When it was over, we didn't speak. He stood, staring down at the floor, his breathing uneven. I couldn't look at him. I felt like my skin was burning, like every nerve in my body was on fire. What had I done? Again? I dressed quickly and left the room before he could say anything. After that night, I wasn't just drowning in guilt, I was drowning in longing. I told myself I wouldn't let it happen again, but it was a lie and I knew it. The more I tried to act normal around Jake, the more unnatural it felt. He noticed. Of course he did. He was too perceptive, too in tune with me. He started asking if I was okay, if something was wrong. I would smile, shake my head, kiss him softly, and tell him I was just tired. I think he wanted to believe me, but things weren't the same between us anymore. Our kisses felt different. I had never noticed before how he kissed me, soft, gentle, like he was handling something fragile. But now I noticed everything. How different it was from Luke. How different I felt with Luke. I hated myself for making comparisons, but I couldn't stop. Luke started avoiding me completely. He wouldn't even come over when Jake was home. It was like he had decided to cut me out entirely, and I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like I was unraveling. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to see him. It was late, past midnight. I told myself I just wanted to talk, to clear the air, to make things right. But when he opened the door and saw me standing there, he didn't ask why I had come. He just stepped aside and let me in. And when the door closed behind me, I knew I wasn't going to leave. The weight of my choices pressed down on me like an invisible force, suffocating me in ways I never thought possible. The affair with Luke had turned into something I no longer had control over. What started as a single, regrettable mistake had become a relentless, undeniable pull, one that I couldn't fight, no matter how hard I tried. I had lost control of my own desires, and now I was trapped between two men who meant everything to me, and yet I was betraying them both in different ways. Jake noticed the change in me. Of course he did. He wasn't blind. He was observant. always had been, and I had never been a good liar. I could see it in the way he looked at me when I thought he wasn't watching, the way his brow furrowed slightly whenever I pulled away from his touch too soon, the way his eyes darkened when I came home late from work, when in reality, I had been somewhere I had no business being. I told myself I could keep it together, that if I just played my part, nothing would come undone. But my own mind was working against me. I was restless, anxious, and it was only a matter of time before Jake confronted me. One night, I came home later than usual. The air in our apartment felt different, heavier. I stepped inside cautiously, my heart hammering against my ribs. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, his hands clasped together in front of him, staring at nothing. He didn't look up right away, but I knew the moment he did, something inside me would break. "Where were you?" His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it, a tension that hadn't been there before. My stomach twisted. I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed excuses in my mind over and over again. But now, standing there, I felt exposed, stripped bare under his gaze. "I told you I had to stay late at work." My voice sounded unnatural to my own ears, too rehearsed, too careful. His jaw tensed, and he finally met my eyes. And that's when I saw it, doubt. "You don't even work that late," he said, his voice low, measured. I checked. My blood ran cold. I forced a laugh, shaking my head as I set my bag down. "Jake, seriously, you checked. What, do you think I'm lying to you?" Silence. I knew I should have said more, should have reassured him. But my body betrayed me, stiffening under his scrutiny. I was caught, not in the act, but in something worse, his growing suspicion. He stood up from the table, walking toward me with slow, deliberate steps. My pulse quickened. I wasn't afraid of him, but I was afraid of what was happening between us. The unspoken words, the unraveling trust. "I don't know. Am I supposed to think you're telling the truth?" His voice was softer now, but the pain behind it was unmistakable. I swallowed, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "Jake, I love you. You know that?" And I did. I loved him in a way that was safe, familiar. But love alone wasn't enough to erase my betrayal. He studied me for a long moment, and I thought, hoped he would drop it. But then he said, "Have you seen Luke recently?" My breath caught in my throat. "What?" I forced a confused laugh, but it sounded wrong. Why would I just asked a question. His eyes searched mine, looking for something. A crack in my facade, a confirmation of his worst fears. I could feel my world tilting, slipping out of my grasp. If I denied it too quickly, he'd see through it. If I hesitated too long, he'd know. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. "Not really. I mean, he's been busy, I guess. Why?" Jake didn't answer right away. He just stood there, watching me like he was trying to piece together a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. Then finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. He's been acting weird too." I swallowed hard. "Weird how?" Jake shook his head, as if he wasn't even sure himself. "Just off. He avoids me, barely talks to me anymore, and you—" His voice trailed off, but I knew what he was thinking. "And you've been different too." I forced a smile, stepping closer to him, placing my hands on his chest. He was warm, familiar, safe. "Jake, you're overthinking. We're both just tired. Work, stress, everything. You know how it is." He exhaled slowly, as if debating whether to believe me or not. Finally, he nodded, wrapping his arms around me, holding me close. I closed my eyes, sinking into the embrace, but all I could feel was the crushing weight of my own guilt. This was only the beginning, and I knew it wouldn't be long before everything fell apart. The days passed in a haze of guilt and paranoia. Every moment I spent with Jake felt like I was playing a role I no longer fit into. My mind was constantly on edge, rehearsing lies, scanning his face for any sign that he knew, that he had proof, that everything was about to come crashing down. Luke had started pulling away. I could feel it. Our stolen moments were growing shorter, the tension between us shifting from passion to dread. He avoided my texts, made excuses not to see me, and when we did meet, he was distant, as if the weight of what we had done was finally crushing him too. I told myself this was for the best, that if we stopped, maybe I could fix what was broken. Maybe I could be the person Jake thought I was. Maybe I could forget. But deep down, I knew it was too late. One evening, I came home to find Jake standing by the window, his phone in his hand. His expression was unreadable, but there was something about the way he stood so still that sent a chill down my spine. He turned to face me, holding up his phone. "I know." My heart stopped. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The weight of that single sentence crashed over me, drowning me in fear. I opened my mouth to speak, to deny, to explain, but there was nothing I could say that would fix this. Jake's voice was eerily calm, too calm. "How long?" Tears pricked my eyes. My body screamed at me to lie, to salvage what little I had left, but the look in his eyes told me it was useless. He already knew everything, and just like that, the life I had built, the love I had taken for granted, shattered before my eyes. He didn't yell, he didn't demand explanations. Instead, he turned away from me, as if I were a stranger, as if I had become someone he didn't recognize. I tried to reach for him, but he flinched. That hurt more than any words could. The days that followed were unbearable. The silence, the avoidance, the suffocating reality that I had lost him. And in the end, when he finally walked away, I knew I had no one to blame but myself.